So welcome everyone to the Cool Season Transition and Microbials seminar. It's part of the Science Behind. My name is Patricia Miller, and I'm just finishing a PhD at U of T. And like David said, I'm the head of turfgrass science at Earth Microbial. And I have an extensive background in chemistry and environmental microbiology. And I worked in lakeshore sediment science as well as in bioremediation of soils by plants. And then more recently moved over to the Poaceae family and became a microbiome specialist. So I focus a lot on the microbiome of plants, and I'm going to be talking a lot about that in this seminar today. So I hope you guys can bear with me. There's going to be a lot of graphs on this. Okay, so let me just get my laser pointer going here. Okay, so the way I'm going to present this today is I'm going to talk about these topics in two parts. The first part is going to be about winter kill and the role of the grass and soil microbiomes, and just sort of some definitions and some background information about that. And then in part two, I'm going to be discussing microbiome management and explaining how to overcome winter kill, how to some recovery strategies, as well as disease and stress management. And I'm also going to discuss nitrogen use efficiency. So how we can use nitrogen to also help mitigate some of these stressors. Okay, so what is winter kill? I'm sure you all know what it is. In terms of the scientific community, they describe it as turf losses. So these are losses that occur directly because of winter conditions. When you're looking through the literature, you tend to see it in two broad categories, so abiotic and biotic, and I'll go over those in a moment. And the results tend to be the same. You're either having damaged or stressed grasses, or you have actual dead patches of grasses in some cases. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about the cold effects on cold tolerance. So cold effects in terms of winter kill are important because they tend to inhibit roots and nutrient absorption, and they induce drought-like conditions. And I'm going to talk a lot about drought, but what I'm really talking about is cold stress, because they have the same impact on the grass, especially on the grass microbiome, as well as how grass grows and how it retains nutrients. So what we want to do is we want to optimize our winter to spring transition by focusing on drought recovery. So that's your key strategy. And that makes it easy because then you can just continue to do those same mitigation strategies throughout the season. And we're going to do that by focusing on root growth promotion and improving nutrient storage. Okay, so what are the two types of stressors? So we have what I was saying before, abiotic stress. So that refers to physical stress. And today I'm going to talk a lot about cold stress and water deficits and basically drought. And then the second category is biotic stress. So this is obviously live stressors, so bacteria, fungi, insects, and I'm going to talk mostly about fungi and a little bit about insects today. Okay, so first I'm going to sort of explain the abiotic cold stress categories. So here I have a little typo. Here it says 3, but actually I'm going to be discussing 4. Okay, I guess it's not a typo. I fixed that, so never mind. So the 3 common types of low temperature injuries are first crown hydration. You're probably very familiar with that. This happens when there's a sudden thaw that happens in the spring, and then it's followed by a sudden freeze. And what happens is the crowns start to retain water in the spring, and when they reach about a maximum of 80%, if that happens, and then a freeze occurs, you get a sudden low temperature, then you're going to have the crowns that burst and kill the grass. The same thing happens if ice crystals form within and you get that sudden low temperature, they'll break through crown tissue. You probably don't get as much of that in the Southwest, but I suppose in the rare occasion that you do have ice crystals happening, then that's what you'll see. And this picture here just is a depiction of what the grass will look like when you have crown desiccate or crown hydration. So the other one that is probably a little bit more common is winter desiccation. And again, this is caused by cold and caused by winter as well as caused by heat. And so in the wintertime, it's caused by high winds and very little precipitation. So in warmer climates, you might see this happening quite a bit more than you see any sort of ice formations. And these cause dry conditions that evaporate moisture from the grass and soil, and this mimics, like I said before, drought effects. The third category is direct low temperature injury. And what happens there is Bermuda grass and warm season grasses tend to be very sensitive to cold temperatures, especially in the spring. They'll be okay during the winter if it gets cold, but if there's a sudden warmth and then again that sudden decrease in temperature below the 5 degrees Celsius or 23 Fahrenheit, that can kill warm season turf grasses quite quickly. And then again in the spring, the cold tolerance, because of that warmth, the cold tolerance of the plant gets reduced by that sudden low temperature. So root growth becomes inhibited, nutrient absorption is reduced, and tissue dehydration occurs. And so in the end, you just get a lot more cold damage. So the next category is biotic stress. So this is low temperature disease. So during the fall, especially, what happens is cold-loving fungi tend to proliferate quite a bit, and they cause a lot of warm season grass infections that begin in the fall, but you don't see those. They're not visible until the spring. And probably a common offender is Ophiosphaerella fungi. There's a few other species that cause this spring dead spot, and it's referred to as SDS. You're probably familiar with that. And it affects roots and increases winter desiccation effects. And it can be successfully remediated if you apply fungicides in the fall, but not always. Just depends how bad the winter is. And what's worse is that it attacks the stolons and the shoots, and it makes its way down to the roots and rhizomes, and it completely severs off the nutrient supply to the above ground tissues. So you can see pictures here of what happens when you see this in the spring. You're actually not seeing a fungal infection, you're seeing dead grass already. So it's already too late at that point. So then you just have to turn to mitigation strategies at that point. Okay, so some of the common mitigation strategies that I'm not going to talk about these as much because I know that you're much more familiar with these than I am. I'm going to talk more about the science, but I'm sure you're familiar with tarping when you know that a cold snap is coming. That can be really successful. You just have to be careful with fungus because they really like that sort of sheltered environment. So of course, I'm sure you know about placing fungicide ahead of time. And then for crown hydration, if that happens to be a problem in your area on occasion, there's been studies that show that aeration in the fall tends to minimize that as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then in the spring, you can reduce fungi. If you have other types of fungal infections that have occurred, you can reduce this by spiking and again, aerification. And also you can, of course, seed dead and bare areas if necessary. You can either let the stolons grow over, which I'm sure you do. Otherwise, you can seed these. And I'm going to talk a little bit about strategies for seeding a little bit earlier when you're not sure if all the fungal infections have been reduced. And I'll just talk a little bit about that. And then the thing that I'm going to focus the most on is throughout the season, and especially in the spring, the use of biostimulants and biofertilizers. And so in that category, what they tend to do for your grass is they fix nitrogen, they reduce stress, and they're involved in pathogen defense. They also promote growth and improve cold tolerance and soil biodiversity. And these types of products are, I'm sure you have seen them already, composts, humic acids. These are really good for promoting root growth, amino acid rich formulations, and of course, beneficial plant and soil bacteria and fungi. And I'm going to focus probably solely on plant beneficial bacteria in this talk. Okay, so I came across a paper in 2023, and what I noticed is there's an uptick since about 2020 in papers regarding turf grasses and plant growth promoting bacteria. So you probably won't have heard about it before 2020 as much. And now with the new technologies, they're starting to pop up quite a bit. So that's good news for you. So this particular paper did a review on all the types of biostimulants that are available, which also include beneficial bacteria. And what they did is they sort of explained all of the benefits that you receive from that. And I just wanted to highlight that of all the benefits, beneficial bacteria are the ones that actually can provide every single one of the benefits listed here. And the other biostimulants can, in combination, do some of them. And so they're also beneficial for your grass. And so some of the highlights of the paper are that biostimulants can enhance the quality of your grass. They augment tolerance to environmental stress, so they can repair your root system. They facilitate an increase in nitrogen, phosphorus, and iron uptake. and they can improve, of course, the visual quality of your grass. Probably most notably, they're not meant to replace fertilizers, but I am going to talk about nitrogen use efficiency later. But they can significantly improve the effectiveness of those fertilizers and even fungicides as well. And they tend to increase carbohydrate storage, and that's especially important for the winter. And biostimulants also increase microbial diversity and activity of both the soil and the plant microbiome. And I'll go into that in the next few slides. Okay, so I just grabbed this interesting sort of picture here where it shows what is the impact of beneficial bacteria in plants and soil, and also what are they doing really in your grass system. So here you can see they're involved in decomposition, nutrient cycling. They have a symbiotic relationship with the plant, and that's why they're really important. This wasn't as well known. You'll see in literature that there's a lot of talk about genotypes and grass types and selecting, beneficial cold resistant or cold tolerant types. But this is the area in which plant growth promoting bacteria are entering into literature right now. There's sort of that missing link where research hadn't been filling in for the turfgrass industry. And so now, as you learn more about that, you can apply this technology or this biotechnology to your system as well. So there are three sort of main categories that plant growth promoting bacteria fall into, or how they help your grass system. First, they produce phytohormones. So we know that synthetic or organic amendments are helpful, things like humic acids, protein isolates, and they can stimulate phytohormones, but they cannot produce them. So only plant and soil beneficial bacteria can produce them. And this is especially true because once beneficial bacteria enter into your system, they are continuously growing and continuously producing phytohormones, whereas other amendments are sort of a one-time application. And phytohormones directly improve desiccation, which is just another word for drought, and tissue damage. And they do this by enhancing root and shoot growth, but they also provide these phytohormones that help shield the plant from stress and deal with stress. And then before I already talked about, they enhance the effectiveness of synthetics, and they specifically can reduce pathogenic fungi. I'll talk more about that later. And they activate plant immunity and something called soil disease suppressiveness. So in the soil, what they're doing is soil tends to have a natural resistance to fungi, but synthetics tend to reduce that. And this is where beneficial bacteria come in and can help restore that in your grass. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit how plant and soil microbes talk to each other or communicate. They communicate very well in a healthy microbiome and a healthy soil. So I thought this was a fun picture with the good soil and the bad soil. Obviously, the bad soil just means that there's an imbalance here in the microbiome. Whereas in the healthy soil, there is a balance and a crosstalk between the microbiome that is promoting healthy plant growth. So plants and soil microbes tend to signal each other and talk to each other through those signals, and they invite healthy microbes in a healthy environment to colonize the plant, and then they defend and send signals against pathogenic microbes. So that's the basis of how they work. They also colonize the inside of the plant and do this within the plant as well. And then I looked at some more papers and found a lot of papers that discussed how the ecosystem management can affect the microbiome interaction. They have a strong impact on that. And what I found interesting was that managed turfgrass systems, although they had a lower carbon and nitrogen content that was available for plants, they did not have less biodiversity, which is important for you because that means there are beneficial soil microbes that you can still attract to your plant as long as you have a healthy microbiome and healthy system. The use of agrochemicals have been found to increase fungal and bacterial infections because they reduce this natural soil disease suppressiveness. So that was another finding. And I'm starting to see that a little bit more in literature too. And what happens is that decreases your grass yields. And this is because most turfgrass diseases are caused by fungi. There are others, and of course there's insect problems as well, but fungal infections tend to dominate. And what happens is agrochemical use will cause this dysbiosis in the microbiome. And domestication as well just naturally has done that and disrupted some of those interactions. And the good news is there is ways to mitigate that with plant growth promoting bacteria, and you can create a healthy system again. Okay, so that brings me to microbiome management and how we can go ahead and create that system. And so what I'm going to talk about here is how to recover from winter kill long term, as well as how to deal with some of the diseases. And winter kill specifically causes mostly drought stress. That's sort of your main thing that you can recover from. And you do this by increasing root architecture, and then this will in turn help you recover quickly and be able to move into spring faster. The other topic I'll discuss is nitrogen balancing. So balancing nitrogen fertilizer inputs in order to reduce pathogenic fungi. So there is a link between nitrogen, how much, and triggering pathogenic fungi. And also you want to improve your soil diversity and function also by balancing nitrogen. And there are ways to do this without compromising available nutrients, and in fact, maybe even increase them for your plant. And this will in turn improve cold tolerance in the plant. And I'll also talk about biotic stress too. Okay, so the key thing for abiotic stress reduction is root architecture. So this is where you want to focus on. So throughout the rest of this, I'm going to be highlighting some papers that I found and just what is the current research and what is it showing. So here on this page, what I wanted to talk about was using root architecture to improve cold tolerance and desiccation recovery. So again, that's drought stress. I found a paper from last year that showed that Bermuda grass, when examined over 2 years, in year 1, it slowed spring green up in year 2 because it was experiencing drought stress. But the plots that didn't experience drought stress had a faster green up. So they were just showing a direct link between drought and spring green up. Here in 2021, this particular study found that cold stress reduces root growth, water absorption, and causes dehydration. But then they also found that enhanced root architecture and length can reduce this impact. So what I did is I found a paper that talked about what are the mechanisms that the plant is using in order to deal with drought. So the main mechanism that your plant is using is its own phytohormones. And it does this and tries to regulate growth. So here on the right side, you see that there's this figure that I took out of this paper. They show one phytohormone here called cytokinin and auxins on the right side. So cytokinin is responsible for all the above ground growth, so all your shoot growth, and auxins are responsible for root growth. And so what happens is your plant uses both of these hormones together in order to mitigate drought. So what it does is it closes stomata, reduces shoot growth during drought, and favors root growth. And it does this so that it can reach available water deep down. So it's really important to focus on root growth because of that. And it also increases the architecture. So all of the small little roots that come out of the grass roots, those are also really important for attracting beneficial bacteria as well as finding nutrients. And this maximizes water and nutrient retention. And then what was really important about this study is that plant growth promoting bacteria produce phytohormones. So we know this from years of study of plant growth promoting bacteria, but these phytohormones, specifically cytokinins and auxins, are present in beneficial bacteria. And also these phytohormones can reduce total plant dehydration. And this in turn will provide you with that improved cold tolerance and transition from winter to spring. And then I just threw in another 2014 study here where they were just highlighting that plant growth promoters will increase significantly top growth and weight as well as root growth after inoculation. And this was done in Bermuda grass, just so you know that there's actually quite a bit of research on Bermuda grasses in terms of plant growth promoting use. And these phytohormones can combat desiccation and drought. Okay, so I'm sure you all know that nitrogen is your #1 limiting nutrient in turfgrass systems, and this is also the key to winter kill mitigation, but it is somewhat complex. So when I was looking through the literature, I found that there was a debate between fall use. So when should you apply your nitrogen? Should you do it early spring or early fall, mid fall, late fall? And in fact, there was really no settling when you were looking at the literature, and there's different points of view. So here in 2002, Richardson, this particular scientist, found that low nitrogen and high potassium in late fall were not supported for Bermuda grass. So he didn't recommend it. He says late fall nitrogen does not reduce cold tolerance. So some studies had said that it does, nor does it inhibit rhizome growth. But he found that as long as potassium is not limiting, you could then apply late season nitrogen. So a little bit of a confusing paper. But he did show that there was a link between late nitrogen application and fall color and early spring green up. Now, Dr. A.J. Koski is a little bit more sure about what he's talking about, and he's from Colorado State right now. He was in Ohio State before. And he says that late fall nitrogen is absolutely essential and ideal for early spring green up with no adverse effects. But he says it has to be in the right form. So later in the season, when temperatures cool down, the microbes in the soil are not as active. So he says it's important to add urea and ammonium and make sure that it's bioavailable and not microbe dependent. But of course, later studies, more contradictions, were saying that in 2012, that, even though you're getting this benefit for your spring green up, there is a link with lower rates of crown hydration, which is good, but an increased rate of fungal pathogens. So higher nitrogen later in the season increases fungal pathogens. And he also found that there was an increase in nitrate leaching. So you got a lot of losses from your nitrogen as well in the cooler temperatures. And Dr. Jim Baird from the University of California Extension also suggests that late fall nitrogen worsens spring dead spot. So a lot of conflicting reviews. Okay, so what I took a look at later was a 2017 study that talked about something called the nitrogen gap. So this kind of relates a little bit to the nitrogen leaching we were talking about in the previous slide. So we know that fall nitrogen is crucial for successful spring green up. And we know that it encourages nutrient storage. It also helps with lateral spread and rooting. This is also essential. But we know there's also some problems. This study was a study that was focusing on the growth of Bermuda grass rhizomes. So how do they grow in the spring, especially in those first 2 weeks of spring? And what they found here was that you can see here in this photo, these are the old roots, and then you see some new roots here. And what they found is that the old roots here were the sole source of nitrogen for the first 10 to 14 days of spring exclusively. So any applications of nitrogen early in the spring were not helpful at all for Bermuda grass. However, what they found is at that 2-week period, there was a sudden drop in nitrogen, and then suddenly the grass was in a lot of need of nitrogen. So that's where you have to balance your nitrogen inputs. They also found that early spring nitrogen was only absorbed by 13% in the plant and had quite a bit of leaching. So how can we fill this gap in late fall or in early spring when fertilizers encourage fungi and also are not used or useful for your plants in the spring? But then you have that sudden drop in nitrogen where you do need to fill that. So before I answer that, I just wanted to mention some research on the soil microbiome, and that's because these are going to relate together later in the talk. So I know this is a lot of papers, but what I really wanted to do was highlight how much research there has been in the last, probably in the last 20 years, but a lot in the last 5 to 10. So fertilizers have quite an effect on the soil microbiome. So in 2021, I found that nitrogen and phosphorus fertilizers in this study were said to provide accessible nitrogen to pathogens. So again, that theme that pathogens are encouraged by too much nitrogen. And of course, your grass needs nitrogen, so we have to look for that nitrogen use efficiency. So they tend to favor it in this paper they showed, but they didn't favor beneficial or mutualistic fungi. In 2020, there was a paper, and I'm showing a picture here, where nitrogen fertilizers cause something called microbial dead zones. So red is dead. So here you see that there was actually patches of dead microbes in the soil after a fairly high nitrogen fertilizer use, but still within the range of what turf grass managers would use. And this is especially true when water supply is low, which happens in California. And it was specifically worse with granules. So you can see here at 15% saturation, you have some healthy microbial growth. So blue is healthy growth. And then, as the water increases, still healthy growth. But as time proceeds, you see that there's more and more of the red zones here. And so here is after 420 minutes, they found that they had complete death of the microbial or the microbes in the soil, in particular pockets in the soil. And when you have 70% saturation of water, you do get some growth of bacteria, but it's quite low. So this was a really interesting effect. And then there's other studies that kind of support that. In 2019, they showed that urea fertilization also decreased soil biodiversity when it was above a specific threshold. They found similar results in farmland. Again, they found that soil disease suppression was reduced, probably a similar effect. And in 2020, Treadway and his team found that fertilizer types with fungicides were correlated with spring dead spot. And he found that it wasn't just the concentration of fertilizers, but also the type. So in his particular study, he found that ammonium-based fertilizers and fungicides did not reduce infection rates, whereas other types did. So there's still more research that needs to get done, but there's quite a bit that we're finding out about microbiomes. So let's get back to the mitigation strategies. How do we balance nitrogen by combining plant growth promoting bacteria, but also still use our fertilizers, but use them more efficiently for optimal results? So research is suggesting from that same paper in the previous slide, they suggest something called nitrogen use efficiency. So it's called NUE. And what they suggest is reducing fertilizer usage to give equivalent or better results using plant growth promoting bacteria. And we use that because it's already part of the system. It's already in the grass, already in the soil, but the plant is depleted. And so we need to just get it back to previous health. So this will increase soil health. It will reduce microbial dead zones. It increases rhizosphere and plant health. So the rhizosphere is the soil around the roots. And it increases plant and soil disease resistance, as well as decreasing fungal pathogens, all while still providing just as much fertilizer to your plants. And I'll explain that a little bit later. And this here is just sort of, I guess, just a graph that explains the balance. What they're saying is balance your microbial activity with your fertilizer, that there is sort of a sweet spot at which you can do that. And here, just another study further talking about nitrogen leaching and how plant growth promoters can help reduce that. Okay, so we already know that nitrogen is the limiting nutrient, and fertilizers in late fall and early spring are not well utilized. So we've established that. We know that too much fertilizer encourages pathogenic fungi, but plant growth promoting bacteria discourage fungi. And nitrogen fixing bacteria can also bridge that gap. And they do this by extending nitrogen fertilizers and also using nitrogen more efficiently. They can increase the effects of lower fertilizer concentration, and they can match full rates. So I'm just going to demonstrate that here in this study. So in 2023, there was a study done on Bermuda grass where they used two different inoculants. So they have this inoculant here, DH44, and this inoculant B20. So just two different types. And what they did is they combined it with half the rate of nitrogen, as well as just inoculating two fields on its own. And then they compared this to the full rate of nitrogen and a control that had no nitrogen. So you can see in the two sites, everything with one star means that they're the same. So here, when you look at the full rate of nitrogen, you can see that combining this plant growth promoting bacteria with half rate of nitrogen actually matched the full rate. And that was sort of the main finding, is that combining plant growth promoting bacteria with a 50% reduction of nitrogen fertilizers matched the results in both quality and growth of fully fertilized fields using 100% nitrogen. So that means you can reduce your nitrogen successfully. And the reason you can do that is because plant growth promoting bacteria also fix nitrogen and provide nitrogen to the plant and do it very efficiently. What was really interesting about this study is that the plant growth promoting bacteria also increased soil microbial respiration and mesofauna over time. This reduced dead zones. And they also found that the full rate of nitrogen, so this one here, had the lowest soil microbial respiration rate in both years. This was over a 2-year period. And that the bacteria inoculated field with no fertilizer had actually the highest respiration rate. But of course, the key is that you want to make sure your plant has enough growth, especially in the roots, and therefore you will probably need to still add nitrogen. So this is the best case scenario. And this is just another study that reiterated the same thing, but was a little bit more complex. And what they used specifically was Pseudomonas fluorescens. If you look through literature, you'll see this particular species a lot because it's associated with plant and soil microbiomes, kind of one of the major bacteria that are associated with it. And what they did is they combined Pseudomonas fluorescens with other bacteria, and they inoculated warm season grass. And they found that inoculated fertilized grass showed 36% increase in growth compared to uninoculated fertilized positive controls. So this here is a positive control. It had the same amount of nitrogen. This one here was inoculated, and the A instead of the B just means that it had more. The D is the negative control, and this is the lowest growth that you'll see. And what was important about this paper is they found that using just Pseudomonas fluorescens combined with other bacteria one time did have an increase in growth, but re-inoculated grass produced the most growth. So they actually showed that it produced 29% more shoot dry weight, and this is an indication also of nitrogen use. So the takeaway of these is that multiple inoculations combined with fertilizers improve spring growth of warm season grasses, and they also increase your soil health. And so combining this with reduced fertilizers can match or exceed the 100% rates for growth in both shoots and roots. Okay, so I just have, looks like just 2 more slides after this. So you guys can all breathe a little bit from all of that, all of those graphs. So here I thought I would slow down on the graphs a little bit and just show you another benefit of plant growth promoting bacteria. So even though you're getting all this use, this efficient use of your nitrogen fertilizers, you can also have additional benefits by using plant growth promoters, and they specifically help with plant immune resistance. So pathogenic fungi selection is reduced when you use them, but also plants have their own immune system, and they actually are activated by beneficial bacteria. So they're naturally activated by the ones they have an association with, and when inoculated, they also are activated. So I just wanted to show you a study here in 2023. They showed that plant growth promoters did not directly inhibit fungi themselves, but what they found is that it activated plant immunity, and they found a reduction of 50% of dollar spot compared to the control. And then in 2021, they showed that plant growth promoting bacteria outcompeted iron from fungal pathogens, also reducing dollar spots as well as parasites. And another benefit of Pseudomonas species specifically and other bacteria is that they can initiate plant metabolites against nematodes. So if you do have problems with nematodes, then these can definitely help. There's a picture up here where we see the effects of root knot nematodes. So they are actually inducing more drought stress into the grass. So these can be a big problem. And here you see an inoculated root that's actually able to grow and produces metabolites against those nematodes. The other thing that plant growth promoters do is they also tend to scavenge or limit iron from parasites. So they eat up all the iron, the parasites can't get the iron they need, so they have to move on. Another study in 2020 found that 94% of nematodes were able to be eliminated while also promoting root growth in the plant. So I guess you can go from a field that looks like this. I should have put a before and after picture, but I didn't, and get into a healthy grass system after using plant growth promoting bacteria. Okay, let's see if I can find my, no, it's not working. A little technical difficulty. I can use a different screen here. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to mention is that plant growth promoting bacteria enhance fungicides as well. So not only are they going to help you efficiently use your nitrogen, but they're also going to help you reduce your fungicides. And the reason you want to do this is, again, you want to increase your soil microbial diversity. You want to increase your plant disease resistance naturally so that it's healthier and grows longer roots. And fungicides, although they help reduce the fungal population, they also can add stress to the plant. And so what we did is we actually partnered with UC Riverside in 2023, and he did a test using plant growth promoting bacteria and combined it with 50% the rate of Maxtima. So both Maxtima and Heritage are fungicides that are listed as effective against spring dead spot. And so he combined 50% of those rates, and he found that there was more disease resistance. So this is a percent decrease in disease found on the plots than when 100% of Maxtima was used on its own. And then again, when plant growth promoting bacteria were combined with Brisquet at 50%, sorry, I got a dog here barking, that you found actually almost 80% reduction in disease. And Brisquet at 100% did pretty well, but Brisquet at 50% couldn't match the rate at which N-Turf could do when combined with Brisquet. So you could just see that there's a benefit. And you can also not only reduce it by 50%, but you can extend the time. And we have had golf courses do that as well. So again, fungicide rates can be reduced by 50%. So that's a more efficient use of your chemicals. And it also has potential against spring dead spot in the fall because, of course, these two are specifically listed as effective against it. Okay, here we go. Now I can see it. Okay, so if you're going to end up dealing, let's say you end up with a spring dead spot in your grass and you have to rake away some of your grass and you really don't want to wait for the stolons to be able to cover over that area, one alternative is to do some reseeding. So if that's your choice, sometimes courses are concerned with fungal infections that are present there, and reseeding can be sensitive because seeds are very susceptible to fungi when germinating. So I just wanted to show you some studies regarding seed germination combined with plant growth promoting bacteria. So actually plant growth promoting bacteria are already commonly used to stimulate seed germination. They accelerate seedling root formation and biomass. So this is something that we've known for over 20 years, probably longer. And so this study here was showing that beneficial bacteria accelerated the rate of germination of Bermuda grass, even in salt concentrations. So here you see this is a treatment of one bacteria. This is another bacteria. And this here is the control. And you can just see that there's a significant difference. So when you see different letters, it just means that this one is significantly higher in germination rate than the control. And the same with this particular bacteria as well. And this was all grown under salt stress. And what they found is that turf quality and chlorophyll content were significantly improved. And the other thing that I wanted to mention was that you can also spray beneficial bacteria just right over your fields the way you would any other application. And in 2008, there was a study that showed that seedlings that were either coated specially or just sprayed in the field had the same success rate. What they did is they actually planted in the fall, and then they had the grass growing, and then they also checked it in the spring, and they found a 96% rate in the sprayed field compared to the unsprayed, which was only 64%. So this is just in case you want to do some overseeding. Okay, so what are the main takeaways of what I was presenting today? I know it was a lot of science. I just kind of wanted to pack all that in there so that you can understand what's happening with your plant microbiome, what's happening in the soil, and ways to help mitigate drought stress as well as disease stress. So the main takeaways today are that plant growth promoting bacteria reproduce in the grass. They provide phytohormones regularly compared to one-time applications. And that's why they're actually sort of the missing link in sort of grass's attempt to reduce drought and fight against biotic stress. They manage drought better for spring green-up. So plant growth promoting bacteria can increase root architecture for faster drought recovery using plant phytohormones. And they also use nitrogen more efficiently, and this will improve your winter recovery. So just to recap, nitrogen and phosphorus fertilizers will select fungal pathogens in turfgrass systems. They can reduce soil diversity and contribute to microbial dead zones. And even the type of fertilizer that you use can contribute to fungal pathogens. So the best way is to figure out what your nitrogen use efficiency will be, what your reduction will be combined with plant growth promoting bacteria. And microbe-independent fertilizers can also reduce diversity, leading to reduced colonization of the rhizosphere and increased pathogens. However, plant growth promoting bacteria with up to 50% fertilizers will match nitrogen rates. And you don't have to do 50% fertilizer, you can add more, but you'll have to test that in your system. And multiple plant growth promoting applications will improve warm season grass. So that was another finding in previous slides. So spraying more than one time will significantly improve your success. And managing drought recovery and reducing fertilizer concentrations improves cold tolerance. So that's kind of the takeaway, that this will improve cold tolerance for this season and for next. And again, if you are overseeding, you know that plant growth promoters can help with seed germination and give you more success. So that's all I have for today. Thank you very much for listening.